Aloha and good afternoon. Thanks for tuning into This Is Now. First today, another violent crime on Oahu, this time out in Kapolei.
Yeah, police are investigating a late-night shooting that sent a man to the hospital. Here are the latest details.
Honolulu police have launched an attempted murder investigation after a 22-year-old man was shot multiple times in Kapolei Monday night. The incident happened around 10:30 p.m. near the area of Kama'aha Avenue and Kanehili Street. Investigators said the victim was in his vehicle when he was approached by several masked individuals who attempted to get into his vehicle. According to HPD, while driving away from the suspects, the victim heard several rounds go off and he was shot several times. Honolulu EMS said the victim had injuries to his face and upper body. He was treated at the scene and then rushed to the hospital in serious condition. At last check, no arrests have been made. The investigation is ongoing. Meanwhile, a judge has confirmed the bail for Waianae murder suspect Corey Farinas at $5 million. The 21-year-old is accused of killing a bystander while firing shots near Waianae Longs on January 20th. 64-year-old Andrew Quisquirin was struck in the head by a stray bullet. Farinas is due back in court tomorrow.
The public is being warned after an alleged kidnapping and reports of strangers approaching children in central Oahu. First, a 16-year-old girl claimed she was taken by someone in a white van near the Mililani Town Center on Friday night. She says she was able to escape the next morning. HPD has not revealed any more information on that case. Mililani Mauka Elementary also sent a letter to parents saying that a student reported being chased by a stranger while biking home. A description of any of the suspects has not been released. Call Crime Stoppers with any tips at 955-8300. A Boston man is on trial accused of lewd acts on board a Hawaiian Airlines flight out of Honolulu. 33-year-old Sudipta Mohanty faces a charge of lewd, indecent, or obscene acts on an aircraft after allegedly exposing himself to a 14-year-old girl during a flight in May 2022. The child moved herself to an empty seat in a different row, and police were notified after the flight's arrival in Boston. If convicted, Mohanty faces up to 90 days in prison.
The state says a commercial fishing boat called the Lady Anna crashed into the Nu'uanu Stream Bridge on Nimitz Highway at around 9:30 yesterday morning. The 40-meter-long vessel was trying to dock at Pier 16 when it struck the metal fence. The state put up a temporary wooden fence and towed the boat back to a berth in the harbor. No word yet on what caused the crash. Yesterday was a nightmare for many neighbor island travelers. Some were stranded overnight in Lihue after Hawaiian Airlines canceled flights and delayed others, in all causing some to wait at the airport upwards of 6 hours. The airlines claims it was partly due to the Hawaii Air National Guard Century Aloha exercise with more than 700 personnel and 50 aircraft, but passengers were also told different stories, blaming it on the weather and even mechanical issues. A spokesperson said the airlines provided lodging for travelers who missed their connections overnight and apologized for the inconvenience. Hawaii Island's electric company Helco is undergoing rolling outages today after unexpectedly losing several large generators. Officials said the outages are needed to avoid larger problems. HECO said 3 of their combustion turbine units tripped offline and another unit is under repair. Hamakua Energy is also not at full output power. At one point this morning, 7,500 customers were without power. We're told the outages are not related to Monday night's generator fire at the Panaeva substation.
Oahu residents can expect more power outages that last longer as HECO implements a new wildfire prevention plan based on lessons from the Lahaina disaster. Power went out in Kailua last Friday for nearly 6 hours. The area is designated at risk for wildfires. When a line shorts out, HECO's new policy is to inspect the lines before turning power back on.
We understand that it does create more inconvenience for our customers with potentially longer outages. The intent here is to make sure that things are as safe as possible.
And it doesn't seem like even though this policy is well conceived, that there are really enough people to implement it properly.
HECO's wildfire response plans include building up capacity to reduce faults due to debris or foliage in high winds, get safety inspections done quickly, and install equipment less prone to weather damage. House Republicans are moving closer to possibly impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over his handling of immigration at the southern border. Skyler Henry is on Capitol Hill with more on what happened at today's Homeland Security Committee hearing, as well as Mayorkas' response to the proceedings.
The House Committee on Homeland Security met Tuesday to mark up 2 articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, moving a step closer to a full House vote.
The actions and decisions of Secretary Mayorkas have left us with no other option than to proceed with articles of impeachment.
House Republicans want the secretary impeached over his handling of the southern border. The articles of impeachment charge Mayorkas willfully defied laws that require migrants to be detained, and that he breached the public trust by claiming that the border was secure.
The failure to secure the border has been so significant, so catastrophic, so egregious.
The GOP effort follows unprecedented border crossing levels in December. Democrats argue disagreements over the Biden administration's border policy do not meet the high crimes and misdemeanors threshold for impeachment.
The sham impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas is a baseless political stunt.
Secretary Mayorkas did not testify during the impeachment proceedings, but sent a letter to the committee chair ahead of Tuesday's hearing, saying the, quote, false allegations don't rattle him. In the letter, Mayorkas also touted a bipartisan Senate border security immigration proposal that he helped negotiate, a deal some House Republicans have already come out against.
If it is what they're advertising that doesn't address remain in Mexico, that doesn't address mass parole, that doesn't resume border wall construction.
Secretary Mayorkas has done what he has the authority to do, which is limited. He has been undermined and sabotaged at every step by Republicans.
House Speaker Mike Johnson says he intends to bring the impeachment issue up for a full vote as soon as possible. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
President Biden is still weighing his options on how to respond to a drone strike that killed 3 U.S. service members at a U.S. outpost in Jordan. This morning, we're learning new details about those who were killed, whose home base was in Georgia. Ed O'Keefe is at the White House.
23-year-old specialist Brianna Moffett, 24-year-old specialist Kennedy Sanders, and 46-year-old Sergeant William Rivers. The 3 Americans killed in Sunday's attack were all decorated Army reservists assigned to the 926th Engineer Brigade out of Fort Moore, Georgia. A U.S. official says the one-way drone used in the attack was Iranian-made, the same kind Iran has provided to Russia to aid in its invasion of Ukraine and to the militias it supports.
Iran continues to arm and equip these groups to launch these attacks.
Pentagon officials tell CBS News the explosive drone came in low and slow several minutes after a U.S. drone was returning from a mission in Syria. The base's air defense system had been temporarily taken offline to allow the American drone to land safely. There was little to no warning for the troops still in their sleeping quarters.
We will respond, and that response could be multi-leveled, come in stages, and be sustained over time.
President Biden huddled with top advisors Monday while it's still unclear whether the U.S. will directly target Iran.
We are not looking for a war with Iran. We are not seeking a conflict with the regime in a military way.
On Capitol Hill, some Republicans say the militias responsible should be hit with force.
These are the tentacles of Iran, and we need to hit the tentacles hard to send a message to Iran that the United States will not tolerate attacks on our troops.
While some Democrats are urging caution.
We are increasingly getting pulled into a wider and wider war in the Middle East, and I think we have to be extremely careful about what our next steps are.
Notably, the Secretary of State said yesterday that in his view, the Middle East hasn't been in such a dangerous situation in at least 50 years. Those are comments that are resonating around the world today as we await some kind of response from the president. And as we do, today at least, he's keeping a decidedly political schedule. Plans to fly to Florida for 2 fundraisers for his re-election campaign. Ed O'Keefe, CBS News, the White House.
We're getting an inside look at Alaska Airlines' efforts to get its Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets back into service after a door panel blew off mid-air earlier this month. Federal regulators ordered inspections and Boeing is cooperating. Chris Van Cleve got exclusive access to see how these inspections are being done.
We're on board an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 outside their Seattle maintenance facility, awaiting an inspection of its door panels. This is our first up-close look at those panels and the 4 bolts holding them in place, now at the center of an NTSB investigation.
It's about a 12-hour process to inspect one of these door panels. First, you have to remove 2 rows of seats, plus all the cabin interior, just to get to the door panel. You're going to check the 4 key bolts that hold this in place, but then there's also 20 pages of measurements that have to happen before that plug can be deemed safe and this airplane put back into service.
I would personally fly next to the door plug and put my kids there myself and fly with me after they've gone through these inspections.
Jason Lai oversees Alaska's engineering team working around the clock.
You're checking for all the hardware, make sure they're in place, make sure all the hardware are tight. We have found some loose bolts and we need to document those.
How common has that been during your inspection?
More than we would like. There have been quite a few aircraft where we have found loose bolts. But what I will say, Chris, is there's been no aircraft with bolts missing.
Investigators are still working to determine if those bolts were in place when the door panel blew out of Alaska Flight 1282. Alaska and United Airlines are flying the MAX 9 again. Alaska is bringing back up to 10 planes a day as inspections are completed.
A chess game is a good way to look at it, Chris.
Captain Brett Payton.
We had to make sure that we had a safe and compliant path forward to operating these airplanes. So we did take it very slow and steady, but we have to make sure we have the safety element done first.
An effort being tracked from Alaska's Network Operations Center, where cameras are rarely allowed, with the goal of completing the inspection work this week. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, Seattle.
The Maui Humane Society is asking for your help. They say they have hundreds of animals in their shelter and zero space to care for them all. Many were brought in as a result of last August's wildfires, and the Humane Society says it's still taking in animals from the burn zone almost every day.
In my experience, this is the worst it's been. Capacity is already a struggle as it is. Shelters across the country deal with this, and of course here on Maui we only have so many resources. But add in the fact that half of the animals we're caring for from the fires, it just adds more of a stress onto our capacity.
The Humane Society is also still caring for nearly 300 cats that survived.
After 114 years in Wahiawa, Petersons' Upland Poultry Farm is closing for good. The egg operation on Dole Road plans to wind down sales at the end of February. A spokesperson told us the company was under economic pressure due to the increasing minimum wage, rising costs, and government red tape.
Coming up on the next Spotlight Now, we spotlight corrections and mental health.
We'll be talking to the head of the state prison system, along with someone in the governor's office who is helping to bring more resources to prisoners. Join us for that conversation live on K5.
Spotlight, once again, happening right after This Is Now. Let's send you live outside. It is a stunning day over there on Hawaii Island. Beautiful mountains off in the distance. Nice, calm bay. What a great place to be, huh, Ashley?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Stick with us. After the short break, we'll have a look at your island weather, as well as a recap of a special project by our very own Stephanie Lum.
winds, which are so gusty over the last couple of days, now is easing up. Now, according to the weather model, the winds will run fairly slow today, tomorrow, and to some extent Thursday. But Thursday night, a front's going to drop in. Friday morning through Monday, the winds are going to be quite gusty. You can see those streamlines indicating some winds might be nearing 40 miles an hour all the way through Monday. So buckle up. We're in for a bumpy ride, but not just yet. We're still seeing some scattered showers today, but we are in a drying trend by this afternoon. Much drier tomorrow and Thursday with those light winds. And then Thursday night, as that front drops in, look for more scattered showers, especially wet on Friday, but not a real rain event, more a wind event with those winds really picking up out of the north, northeast. And when those winds come in out of the north, overnight temperatures will drop. It's going to be a little bit chilly. And look at those wind speeds all the way through Monday, running in excess of 25 miles an hour. So again, the first alert is for Friday and Saturday, mainly because of those gusty winds. And during this time frame, don't be surprised and prepare for the possibility of spotty power outages, maybe even some downed trees, and maybe even some property damage. So heads up, bumpy weather on the way.
Our Stephanie Lum is launching a new series called Journey to China, Hawaii's Connection. It's a deep connection for the majority of Hawaii Chinese who trace their roots to southern China. She and video journalist Corbin Gregory followed the Chinese Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii overseas.
After 3 years of being closed to international travelers, China reopened to visitors just last year. All direct flights from Hawaii to China ended in 2020. So we flew 9 hours to Manila, Philippines, and then another 4-hour flight to Xiamen, a bustling city in the Fujian province.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime trip for many going to China in our group. For me, it's a chance to learn more about my family and also, if we're lucky, get to see the village where they once lived.
That's because many villages were torn down to make way for new development. But we also saw most construction at a standstill, cranes sitting idle, signs of the country's slowing economy. But there was a common theme, from rural areas and farmlands to industrial towns. Everyone in this communist country is working hard to be successful. With more than 30 provinces, China is larger than the United States. And with more than 1.4 billion people, China's population was only eclipsed by India just last year. Of the many dialects, Mandarin is still the main language. Our arrival in Honolulu's 3 sister cities, Fuzhou, Jiangzhou, and Zhongshan, sparked excitement and a media frenzy.
The purpose of our Narcissus Festival is to promote Chinese heritage and culture and to foster the relationship between China and America.
On the streets, we saw very few international travelers. Corbin, our video journalist, stood out and drew many curious and friendly Chinese.
You are the first group of Americans I met in my career. You guys are so friendly and so nice because you speak softly just like me. Okay. So it feels so comfortable to get on with you.
During our visit, President Xi Jinping met with President Joe Biden in San Francisco and said China is ready to be a partner and friend of the United States. The world's 2 largest economies have had a strained relationship for many years.
I think the U.S. has long had
questions about China's trade practices, human rights concerns about things going on inside China. From the other perspective, I think the Chinese government sometimes feel like the U.S. is keeping China from having a more substantial role internationally.
Politics aside,
I'd like to extend a warm welcome to friends from Hawaii to the beautiful city of Fuzhou.
The Chinese Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii has maintained its long-standing friendship with the country that sent its first group of immigrants to the islands in 1789.
There's about 70,000 pure Chinese here in Hawaii, but if you include the Hawaiian Chinese, we're at about 250,000 people. While we're part of the U.S., they almost see us as a melting pot.
The chamber presented Chinese government officials a custom-made aloha shirt honoring the more than 20,000 Chinese Americans who served in World War II. As allies, China and the U.S. fought together then. The veterans and their families earned congressional gold medals in 2021.
I think history will repeat itself to bring the United States and the People's Republic of China together again.
A sentiment reflected in Hawaii's decades-long friendship with our sister cities in China.
And we truly hope to inherit the legacy of friendship and pass it on from generation to generation.
And that was a special report by our very own Stephanie Lum. And in fact, she joins me now here in the H&N Digital Center to talk about this amazing project. Stephanie, we just watched that story. Tell us, what was that like to put that together?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dylan. I'm a huge fan of yours. Thank you so much for having me on This Is Now. Wow. When I first got the invitation from the Chinese Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii to come with them to southern China, oh my goodness. And I told all of my coworkers, the first thing that they said was, "Are you sure? China? Is it safe? Are you going to come back?" And that's kind of the way that I felt too, going into the trip. A little bit scared. Not much is known about China. After all, they closed off to visitors due to COVID, and they only recently opened up, and that's the reason why the Chinese Chamber of Commerce decided to resume its annual trip to China. When you look at family photos, Dylan, you know there is a story behind each picture. And for me, while I knew some of the details, I felt like a large piece was missing. I went on this trip thinking that there was a possibility. They presented that idea, hey, would you like to go in search of your roots? That took a lot of work on my part. I had to go and dig up old videos and interviews that I did with my dad. And I was so lucky to retrieve some useful information. We got clues from my relatives' grave sites with the help of the chamber. I won't give it away, but that is one of the stories that I'll be presenting in this 10-part series.
Wow,
Yes.
10 whole parts. That is a lot to put together. Anything surprised you along the way?
Ooh, boy, a lot of things surprised us. I came on this trip having a short story list, and the reason why it ballooned is because from day one when we arrived, we hit the ground running, photojournalist Corbin Gregory and I, and we found ourselves working 14-hour-long days just because there was so much to cover. After all, China has thousands and thousands of years of history. And some of the eye-opening things, Dylan, you may have heard of: China's cashless society, China's surveillance nation. It is true. You are tracked. No joke.
Ooh, wow.
So I take an in-depth look at that. And what I discovered is very surprising. Even more surprising, the residents' reaction to that. Because here in America, that wouldn't fly, right? I mean, it's a violation of our privacy. In China, it's the way of life. It's what they're used to, and there is a reason behind that, which they explain in one of those stories.
Just a few more questions for you. Let's talk about that cultural connection between here and Hawaii. Of course, our culture has such heavy influences from Japan, China, the Philippines, the entire Asia-Pacific region. Where do you think that bond here in Hawaii is strong, or do you think more residents from Hawaii need to go to China and experience it firsthand?
So many of your family members who have this information are gone. You want to inquire about your heritage, about your ancestry before it's too late. it's a shame when some people would ask me, do you know where your family's from? The only thing I could say was southern China. Boy, did I learn so much. I learned the village that they're from. I learned, the county that they're from. I learned, and I don't want to give this all away, but just, what they were in charge of in their village, the great sacrifice that my great-grandfather made to come to Kauai. He landed on Kauai on a boat, and he was just 17 years old. He sold a cow, which paid for his passage. There is a lot of things that you can learn by being on the ground, talking to people, instead of just going off of what you're hearing.
Yeah, it's always important to learn where your family's roots come from. Our Hawaii News Now anchor, Stephanie Lum, outlining her amazing trip to China. Keep an eye out for all of her special reports coming up in the coming days and weeks on Hawaii News Now and online as well. Steph.